to pass it back to you at this point because, you know, clearly you're a historian, but you have an educational project, you know, called The Black Secret. Why don't you go into that a little bit, and then Joyce, why don't you follow up on that?
Mm-hmm.
The Black Secret was an idea of being able to teach adults all over the world Black studies. And the very first topic in Black studies is, of course, Black history. So the idea that we did was to put together about 36 classes, 55 hours worth of history content, put it online so people could watch it at their convenience. But we want to go further than just the history. We want to go after all of the subjects, exactly the way the baseline people did it. So if we look at the baseline essay on, say, mathematics, you had back in the day various people writing books on, for example, Africa Counts was a classic book that came out in the 1970s. There's a lot wrong with the book, but there's a lot right with it. And then you had Professor Ivan van Sertima's Blacks in Science 1983, which added to the game. And then after that book, you had people like Dr. Charles Finch's book, The Star of Deep Beginnings, which has moved the game even further on. There was a scholar from West Africa called Abdul Karim Bangura, who wrote a book called African Mathematics. Me and one of my colleagues, John Matthews, we wrote a book called African Mathematics. And so what we did was to collect all that development and turn that. So if people who want to teach STEM subjects, we've now put that in book form where we've updated what the earlier writers have done. Now, our work is far from definitive, far from the final word, but we've got what we have. People who know more about it than us can add to what we've got and move the game forward. And what I'm suggesting is certainly the Black Secret will do this in the future, but we invite as many of our scholars to do this so that where we do have total control over the education system, because we should have had total control in African countries, we should have had total control in Caribbean countries. I'm not naive. I know that the forces of neo-colonialism, I'm not naive. But the main point is, if the material is in book form, if the material is available, if we don't make use of it, that's our fault. If the books don't exist, you could say the material doesn't exist. Our job as scholars and educators and so on is to make the literature exist. Once it exists, the next stage now is to get it into institution after institution and after institution. See, so let me just make one final point. I'm aware that African Americans are losing at this point because of the far right-wing backlash. But what you all have done already has been so powerful. I'm in London. I'm aware of what you all did with the baseline essays. I'm running with it. And there'll be people doing what I'm doing in all the other countries, taking the baton and running with that baton. So the more of us doing it, the more unstoppable this education revolution becomes. As a thank you for visiting our website, we are giving you a free copy of our exclusive 100 Black History Facts, which is in fact a taster of our course content. Make sure you leave your email address and we will send it right to you. We hope it inspires you to dig deeper into your history and heritage.
Joyce, can you say something about some of the stuff you're doing? Particularly, I know that you're involved with Brazil. You know, I know that as you talked about, there's some pockets of there's homeschooling. Was it Thais Snowden? I think her name is that. I've talked to her a couple of times.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
Platform. And
so
other things.
I wanna kind of push back a little bit on the idea that we're losing. We are on the ropes, but we're not losing.
We
We
got
have
the rope for dope. We got the rope for dope coming.
well, I want to make 3 points. I want to say something about Brazil. I want to say something about Africa, and I want to say something about bottom-up community approaches here. So let me start with the last point. Robin mentioned supplementary schools. You just mentioned homeschooling. There are a lot of spaces where we are in charge, controlling the education, using the material that we value and produce. One of our limitations is we're not connected across these different spaces. Robin, I would also point out Tony Warner's work in London, Black History Walks, which we know about here. This is a program with, film and walking tours, and he's got books out. So we need to do a better job representing the Black Secret and all of these initiatives, someplace central where people can go to see, well, here's a model, here's something that I might want to use. But the work that I'm doing with a community-based youth civic leadership program called the Guardians of Heritage, we have come to the conclusion, we had 22 young people from age 10 up to 19 in 12 cities in the US and 3 in Brazil studying online, in some cases in English and Portuguese, simultaneous interpretation. And the children, along with parents and elders, were learning technology tools and learning to produce educational material. So they have a podcast series. It's called Guardians of Heritage Talking Drum. They have produced mobile apps that are directed toward collective community problem solving. And we've done this as a prototype of an approach for education that includes all levels, the parents, the children, the elders, graduate students, and researchers. So that's a program model that we have. One of the conclusions that we've come to is that there's a lot of material out there. Online, you can find many, many examples of content. What we don't have is a standard that says, this is the criterion that we are applying to determine whether or not this resource actually meets our needs. So that's something that we're actually working on. We're training young people as researchers, not only to produce educational material, but also to educate educators and parents. So that's a space to work in, and which is why I'm saying we're on the ropes, we're not losing. There are examples of films that have been produced. There are 2 films just come out. Runoko Rashidi's legacy film that can be rented now. Let me get the title of it so I can speak specifically. Runoko's film is Global Assignment, The Life and Times of Dr. Runoko Rashidi. That film is available. Tony Browder produced it with support from a community organization, a BEN, a Black Education Network. So people are coming together to do good production, not just books, but also other resources. The other film that's just come out is Kemet Shockley's film, Cultural War, Focus on Black Youth. It's available on YouTube and Tubi. It's about the whole education question that we're talking about. I'm in it. Tony Browder's in it. Some other leading folks. So we're on the ropes. We're not losing. I want to say just 2 other points about Brazil and Africa. I've been collaborating with brothers and sisters in Brazil for more than 25 years. When I was teaching at Stanford, I was on the faculty at Stanford University in the late 70s. I had a student from Brazil who had worked with Paulo Freire. She introduced me to her husband, who was a doctoral student, who came to me and said, there's a Black woman in Brazil that I want you to know. And this was before internet. We spent a couple of years writing letters to each other. And her name is Petronília Gonçalves e Silva. She's a leading educator in the Black movement in Brazil, and she helped to write the law that was put into place to require the teaching of African and Afro-Brazilian culture. So we started working together more than 25 years ago. When I went to Brazil to do some work with her in the early 90s, I was doing a workshop with parents. And one of the, I'm speaking English, somebody's translating. One of the mothers asked me, why didn't we resist? So get this picture. Here I am telling them about Zumbi and Palmares that they did not know about. But I just came back from Brazil in November. I'm at a school and the children are doing coloring pages of Zumbi's wife, Dandara. So in that time period, even with the military, Bolsonaro, and all kind of, right-wing retrograde politics, the educators and the community has been able to keep their history and to pass it on. So we don't want to perpetuate this idea that we've lost. We're fighting, as we always have, fighting back. Now, the last thing I want to say is about Africa. Just by chance, someone sent me a copy of the McKinsey report talking about African development and education and the whole scene of, sort of what's happening in Africa. And so there's a narrative of Africa that has escaped our attention, but other people are paying attention, right? So they say that by 2050, about 25% of the world's population will be from the continent. And they're talking about how is this youthful population of Africa going to contribute to the development of this powerhouse that's coming along? Well, guess what? Some people are already in front of that. They've got scholarships. They're educating young Africans. A company, I don't want to promote the name of the company, but they're training 100,000 software engineers in online courses, short courses like The Secret, but we have no idea what is the perspective of that education that they're getting. And so just like the baseline essays came about, we need some research. We need to get in front of what's happening because some people are capturing our young people's minds and taking them someplace where they don't need to go.
You're 100% right there. And the whole battle, if you will, is a battle for the capture of the mind. And as you know, our minds have been captured and distorted. And they're working on the young African mind. As you know, there's a program, YALI, the Young African Leadership Initiative, where they bring young Africans, the brightest of the brightest, bring them over here to the United States and introduce them to American culture and the American educational system, which of course does not include African Americans. So they go back and they've been properly indoctrinated so that they'll do their master's bidding. Plus the other thing, Joyce, and this is, shall we say, pointing to the failings of the system as opposed to anything that's positive, is that there are 100 million African youngsters that are outside of school. 100 million in Africa that are outside of school. I mean, that is the shame. And of course, these are the ones that are going across the Sahara, they're drowning in the Mediterranean, they're going to Saudi Arabia, they're being whatever, their organs are being taken or whatever. I say that to say that, we have a big job. And I support what you're saying, that we're on the ropes. Of course, as long as we're breathing, we're not defeated. And as long as we have a Joyce King and a Robin Walker, we're not defeated. So, we're going to have to continue now to spend time